Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Can Houston shock the world on Saturday and upset Duke? Also, what does South Carolina need to do to beat Texas on the women's side? And should the Knicks be worried when they think about the playoffs this year? This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Houston faces the favorite to win the national title in Duke. What do they need to do to pull off the upset? Our bracket breakdown crew discusses.
Let's send it over to Tanitra and Andy, who are joined by Locked On Big 12 host Drake Toll.
So, Drake, before we get started, Andy and I have a question for you. So let me get this straight. Chaney Johnson can sub in for Janai Broome, do superstar work, and come to his interview with us on time. But you, Diva Sir, could not take the time to make it on time for Andy and me.
Look,
how goes it, man?
I'm on the Banana Ball World Tour right now. The Party Animals and Savannah Bananas just sold out the Atlanta Braves Stadium. We're going to do the same thing at the home of the St. Louis Cardinals this week. I'm on a weird schedule today. I'm in a hotel room. I've got an excuse. I've got a doctor's note.
Hey, and I'm just envying you, just a little bit of FOMO, you being in my hometown, my adopted hometown of Atlanta. So thank you for joining us. But hey, let's just get down to the fact that you got some revenge and some avenge opportunities in this Final Four. And you know that old saying goes, revenge is a dish that is best served cold. So how much is Houston shot to avenge last year's Sweet 16 loss to Duke? Maybe some motivation for the Cougs.
Well, revenge is a dish best served in the Final Four here for Houston, and that's exactly what they expect it to be. And that the win against Tennessee it's what has most of America opening its eyes to Houston being a kind of a boring basketball team, honestly, because they like to slow you down, because they like to suffocate you defensively. I saw a tweet that said Houston is made up of 2 hoopers and 3 guys who could start for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that is the way that Houston conducts its basketball team under Kelvin Sampson. You know, Tennessee only turned the ball over 9 times. This wasn't just an egregious game for the Volunteers. The rebounding battle was fairly tight. Tennessee had 20 free throws. Houston had 4. So why did the Volunteers lose by 19 points? Well, they shot 15 for 52 overall, 29%, 5 for 29 from 3 because Houston's defense is suffocating. And that is what the Cougars will bring into the matchup against Duke. Last year, L.J. Cryer was a massive catalyst for Kelvin Sampson. This year, he is all over again. He remembers the Sweet 16 loss to Duke. Cooper Flagg wasn't in the Sweet 16 last year. He was in high school, competing, getting ready to play for Duke. And I know that L.J. Cryer, who has been in college basketball now for 5 years, has that chip on his shoulder of, look, if I can go lead this team, a guy who's won a national championship at Cryer, he was there in Baylor in 2021. If I can lead this team the same way I was able to help lead that Bears team, we can go into Duke with some wily veterans that know how to play ball, especially on the defensive side. Houston, with this revenge game on tap, has a bit of that edge.
Drake, the Cougs played a pair of really close games against Gonzaga and then the game against Purdue where they needed a last-second shot to win. Obviously, as you mentioned, that comfortable win over Tennessee to get to the Final Four, but how much do you think them being battle-tested, especially compared to a Duke team that really hasn't had those experiences, how much do you think that's going to help them with an advantage in this matchup?
It's such an interesting point you make there, because we talk about Houston being battle-tested, but then they haven't lost more than one game, only that Texas Tech loss in conference play, since Feast Week, when we were talking about games in the Bahamas. Houston's only lost once since then. So battle-tested, yes, but they haven't felt defeat. They're on a wild tear, one that the Big 12 has never seen before in just year 2 for them to be in the conference. So as much as you can ask the question, man, Duke's blowing out a lot of teams, Houston has really been in that boat for a large portion of this season. They didn't feel that tightly contested, hard-nosed brand of basketball until this last weekend of the Sweet 16. And when they met it in full stride because Kelvin Sampson is their head coach. When Tennessee pulled it tight, or when they needed a perfect set, an inbounds play under the basket against Purdue, Kelvin Sampson is that guy on the sidelines that I will bet on 10 times out of 10. John Shire, very good at what he does. Kelvin Sampson's been around the sun a few more times than Shire in this matchup, I think I can lean on Kelvin Sampson to make the right adjustments to be able to take down a Duke team that is so good offensively. That Houston defense, number 1 in the nation, versus the Duke offense, number 1 in the country, is must-see television this weekend. And for Duke, who played a much worse strength of schedule out of the ACC that was down this year, and for Houston, who is playing against Kansas or Baylor or Arizona or Texas Tech, give me the school, give me the team that was battle-tested more so over the course of the season and went 19-1 in conference play.
Yeah, a team that's battle-tested, a coach that's battle-tested as well, and that team being battle-tested, kind of growner than Duke, as I like to say, with a lot of veteran guys. How do you feel that kind of experience or that kind of age may play a factor, maybe, and be a big role against these Blue Devils?
Well, that's what's different in this game. When we mention the stars of the matchup, for Duke, you're mentioning a kid who's 18, 19 years old in Cooper Flagg. For Houston, you're mentioning 24-year-old LJ Cryer, who has played, a senior who has played in the biggest games in college basketball, who, again, has been in the arena, ball in hand, in the national championship game. And even a few weeks ago, in that Midwest region, coming out of the Sweet 16 against Gonzaga, 81-76. A high-scoring game for what Houston does, and that's them showing you some variation of how they could win this year. Cryer is old enough and has enough experience in college basketball. He can look around the locker room with a bunch of other 22, 23, 24-year-olds and say, hey, guys, we're playing a kid who is a generational player, but was in high school last year. And if we can suffocate him when he has the ball, if LJ Cryer can handle the other guards from Duke and we can double or put extra pressure and make him uncomfortable early, what if on the biggest stage Cooper Flagg has ever played on, we can rattle him a little bit? Now, that's tough to do. This is as pro as you can get for a young kid in Cooper Flagg, but I know that's an emphasis for Cryer and company with Houston.
Appreciate the time, Drake. Enjoy Atlanta.
Always. Next time you ask me to come on the show, I'll be 15 minutes late.
Fair enough, Diva. Fair enough. Appreciate the time.
See you guys.
Check out the Bracket Breakdown show on the Amazon Fire TV channel app and stay up to date all year on the Houston Cougars by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Cougs on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Your Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, South Carolina, Texas. It's gonna be a war in the women's Final Four. Before we get to that, Trey McBride just became the highest paid tight end in the league. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you can start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Trey McBride is now the highest paid tight end in NFL history.
Well, Cardinals do it again while I'm on the beach. 4-year, $76 million contract extension for Trey McBride. Stays with the Arizona Cardinals through 2029. This is a good day. This is something we knew was going to happen. This is something that is well-deserved. And with the $43 million guaranteed, it really isn't that much of a bank breaker for the Cardinals. Monty Osford does it again. Trey gets paid. Kyler has his top target for now. And, it's a good day here in Puerto Rico as well. I'll have everything back when I'm back on Monday. Keep it locked till then. I'm Locked On Cardinals, your team.
We've seen some crazy gaudy stat lines in the NBA lately. Giannis Antetokounmpo, the latest superstar to put up a historic night.
Giannis appreciation. This is another one of those nights where, you look at him and you just say, like, that's the best player I'm ever going to watch in my lifetime as a Bucks fan. And you just, tip your cap to him. And another clutch block in the last, I don't know if it was last minute or 2 minutes, after, I think it might have been after another Nick Richards offensive rebound. Yeah. Just another night of Giannis doing Giannis things. And certainly without him doing that, nothing else would have mattered. So, one more reason to be thankful that Giannis Antetokounmpo is on our team and not somebody else's.
And on the diamond, Alex Bregman went off for the Red Sox as they beat the Orioles 8-4.
Alex Bregman has arrived as he hit his first home run of the season in the Red Sox 8-4 win over the Orioles today. He also recorded 2 other extra base hits in the game, both of those being doubles. So it was really nice to see him really crushing the baseball and having productive at-bats today. Rafael Devers also adding a hit. Tristan Casas recording his first home run of the season, and Christian Campbell hit one over the wall as well. So the Red Sox certainly brought some power today, recorded an 8-4 win, and grabbed the series over the Orioles. Great momentum builder heading into the home opener tomorrow. Lots of good things that I saw. Because Garrett Crochet went 8 full innings last night, it allowed Garrett Whitlock to not have to be used, so he was able to throw 2 innings in today's win. So the more you can do things like that and have to use guys for a couple innings so that they don't have somebody else have to throw, it's great. So awesome stuff from the Red Sox. Hope to see them win tomorrow in the home opener.
South Carolina and Texas came down to a coin flip for the top seed in the SEC tournament this season. Now they will meet in the Final Four for the women. Who will win? Our bracket breakdown show previewed the matchup.
All right, we got to bring in another perspective on the issue. So let's hear from Locked On Women's Basketball contributor Rob Knox, who is with our own Tanitra.
So, Rob, Dawn Staley has instilled a mentality that this South Carolina team will play to the double zeros. They're going to make fewer mistakes when it matters most. But how can the Gamecocks be that aspect of themselves? You know, the slow starts, the cardiac comebacks that we seem to have seen throughout this tournament, and still beat Texas?
They just have a belief. South Carolina, they know it's 40 minutes. They know during the 40 minutes, because of the experience, they're going to have laws. They're going to struggle. They're going to, face some adversity. Basketball's a game of runs. And I think Dawn's just so patient and confident in her team. And they have players that make winning plays when it matters the most. I mean, obviously, South Carolina is going to, always look polished or like the most perfect version of how you envision basketball to be played. But at the end of the day, when you look up, they have more points than the other team. And, obviously in March and now April, that's all that matters.
Yeah, and you look back to last year, I think we forget that there were some close calls last season, and the South Carolina team was able to prevail. How do they pull back from that experience and say, hey, like you said, we've seen it before, so we can believe that we can do it again?
Well, I mean, obviously 2 words. Raven Johnson she's the leader of the South Carolina program, of the South Carolina team. You look at Raven, and obviously, her stats will never jump off the screen at you. But Raven, what she does, I mean, she provides that leadership, she provides that calm, she provides the intangibles that every successful team needs. So again, when they trail, and I mean, fortunately this year they've had the experience of trailing at half, even though it was 1 point against Indiana, and they came out and took control in the third quarter. They faced a fourth quarter deficit late against Maryland. They faced a fourth quarter deficit against Duke and were able to, again, make winning plays down the stretch. And Raven was in the middle of all of that. So I think that, South Carolina, they always do a good job of drawing on their experience. And again, the one thing I remember Dawn Staley last year in the championship game when Iowa went out 10-0 and Caitlin Clark was hitting shots from all over the place.
Yeah.
And the building was going crazy. Everybody's going crazy. And I just looked down at Dawn, and she's just standing there. And most coaches, I know if I was coaching the team, I'd call a timeout and jump on the team and everything like that. And I think Dawn picks her spots because she really understands her team. She really knows her team. And I think the fortunate thing for South Carolina, I mean, obviously you would prefer not to play a team a fourth time.
Sure.
Is that they know Texas. So so I think that it's a good matchup for South Carolina. So I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, having that championship pedigree and believing in that pedigree certainly helps a lot. But let's go back to Raven Johnson. Raven said Dawn Staley told her to just go out and get that win, and ultimately that's how they were able to overcome the deficit and beat Duke. So looking back at that, great, but you mentioned it. We haven't quite seen the Raven of old, the Raven from last season who literally was locking down everyone. Or even I'll take you back to my days of watching her back in her days at Westlake High. But ultimately, you do have Malaysia Fulwiley, you have Tessa Johnson, you have Joyce Edwards, a.k.a. the daycare. So if for some reason your veterans don't quite have it going, how does the daycare get it done?
It's really interesting. They play so free. You look at for Wiley, against Marlon. Marlon had zero answer for her, right? So she was able to come in and control the game and get South Carolina back into the game. And I'll say this: I think that what happened against the Maryland game, when they were down 7. I thought Merlin took some tough shots. He missed a few chippies under the basket, and they weren't able to balance the floor. So for a while, he was able to go sprint to the other end of the floor, get in transition, get layups, pass the pow, and next thing you know, you look up and South Carolina's up 2 going into the fourth quarter. I think they just have a phenomenal job just reading the game, just reading the moment, and everybody delivers when it's their moment. And again, I think that it's just something just inherent in this team and in this program. And obviously, it starts at the top. But, South Carolina is very impressive. And, I know there's chatter out there, or they haven't looked good, they haven't been impressive, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But I think people always forget in March you're playing other good teams, right? So there's always – so the teams you're playing are good.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not going to be as easy to win by 15, 20 points and, look beautiful doing it.
Right.
You're going to have to get your nails dirty. You're going to have to get your hair, out of place. You're going to maybe lose a lash or something like that. But, at the end of the day, if you have more points than the other team, you get to keep playing.
Yeah, I don't think they care about losing a lash if they get to cut some nets. Thank you so much for joining us again, Rob. Appreciate the time.
Always a pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Check out the Bracket Breakdown show on the Amazon Fire TV channels app and stay up to date all year on the South Carolina Gamecocks by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Gamecocks on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, should the Knicks be worried about the playoffs? The New York Knicks have struggled to win games against playoff teams and have failed to win games against playoff teams seated higher than them. Locked On NBA Game Night hosts David Ramil and Jackson Gatlin discuss whether that means they should be concerned come playoff time.
Okay, so to Gavin's point, right? Look, the Knicks are now 0-8 against Cleveland, Boston, and OKC combined. Winless against the 3 best teams in the NBA. To add to that, to add salt to the wound, they're also 0-6 against a combination of the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Warriors. So all the California Kings, or all the California teams not named the Kings. David, how concerning should this be for the Knicks that they're seemingly unable? And yes, there's injuries and stuff like that to consider, different variables. But how concerned should Knicks fans be that they have been unable to scrap together even one win against the NBA's elite?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd put the level of concern at around a 3. And I think you cannot take what teams do in the regular season all that seriously because, as you said, the playoffs are a completely different animal. It's not just the injuries and everything else. It's about schemes. It's about game-to-game changes or tweaking certain lineups and things of that sort. And without Jalen Brunson, that team is just so incomplete. You talked about, Gavin mentioned the fact that New York was in a very good place in the first half due to Anunoby shooting, and Karl Anthony Towns was fine. But this has been the recipe for this team all season long, as they kind of just keep things close and then let Jalen Brunson take over as he has because he's been such a great clutch player. Without Brunson, they just don't have that spark. So with him in the lineup, assuming he comes back, assuming he's healthy, I still like their chances, although, they're the best teams in the league for a reason. You don't expect anybody to be able to compete with them. So there's some level of concern. I just can't point to that and say I can't dismiss the Knicks outright despite whatever they've accomplished in the regular season.
That's a fair assessment. We'll see what it ultimately looks like in the postseason if and when the Knicks ultimately match up with one of the Cavs or the Celtics. I guess it might not matter against that West Coast elite unless they make it to the finals, which at that point that's probably a pretty successful season if you're the Knicks. So.
Of course, the Knicks should be concerned. It's not just that they have struggled to beat the best teams in the East. It's that in a playoff series against, let's say, the Bucks, in the 3-6, they're not going to have the best player in the series. That's going to be Giannis Antetokounmpo. And we know Damian Lillard is capable of being the best player in that series. Sometimes these playoff matchups can be as simple as which team has the best guy. And it's not just that, for example, the Bucks have Giannis. The Knicks have no answers for a player like Giannis. If they play the Pistons, let's say, who is guarding Cade Cunningham? That team is long, they're athletic, they're aggressive. These matchups may not favor the Knicks, even though the Knicks have been a very good team. They're probably going to win 50 games this season. But are they good enough defensively? You can hunt Jalen Brunson. What's his health status? What's the status of Karl Anthony Towns? How is he going to perform in the playoffs? You're relying on a superstar who has had some issues in the postseason. It's not really where you want to be. And finally, Los Angeles Dodgers first baseman Freddie Freeman, who slipped and fell in the shower Sunday morning, was put on the injured reserve list with an ankle injury, the team announced Thursday. The move is retroactive to Monday. He hasn't played since Saturday and is 3 for 12 this season with 2 home runs and 4 RBI. Maybe you got to get those grippy things to put on the floor. You don't want to miss time because you slipped in the shower. Man, it's always baseball players. Why do they always have these kinds of injuries? I don't know what it is about baseball players. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up, who will be playing in the national championship? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.